The topic today is designing for mobile. We will discuss in a kind of a conversational mode the strategies around defining mobile, what is mobile, and do we need a native version versus an HTML5, how you think about that, and do we need to decide if applications need to, how to support design on multiple mobile devices out there. So all these various questions will cover, and by way of webinar logistics, we'll have 45 minutes or so of the actual session of presentation, and I'll introduce the speaker in a minute. And as usual, after that, I will reserve another 10-15 minutes or so to take questions at the end, but we'll also have opportunity to take questions along the way. Some questions may be such that they need to be answered along with the flow. So this is Hemant Alhans, I'm founder CEO of Synerzip. I run these webinars, so I'll pick up those questions along the way, and I'm sure many of you have been attending our webinars regularly, so welcome back. And let me, with that, introduce the speaker. I'm delighted to have Nikhil Deshpande, who's the Digital Strategy Director for Georgia Gov, as our speaker for this topic of designing for mobile. He leads a team of designers, writers, developers, and social media strategists in his role. And he manages the Georgia.gov and a content publishing platform for various state agencies and elected officials. His background is in advertising before he moved to digital design. And he's also an adjunct faculty at Savannah College of Art and Design at the Atlanta campus. So I'm delighted to welcome Nikhil to this series of webinars. With that, over to you, Nikhil.
Thanks, Hemant. Yeah, I'm really glad to kind of be talking about this because most of the projects that we have been working on lately are mobile-driven. So, you know, I really should be kind of saying that this presentation should be called "Mobile is not the future," because it really is not. Mobile is already here, so we should stop treating it like mobile is the future, and better start planning for it if you're not already doing so. I really can't do this presentation without mentioning Luke Borblinski. He was the first whistleblower back in 2006, 2007 who saw mobile coming, and he made sure that he got in front of the design community, the development community, and he kind of started making everyone aware that okay, mobile is going to be the next thing. He clearly saw that designing for just desktop interfaces was not going to be enough. Developing for desktop interfaces and just kind of was not going to be enough. We have to think about mobile devices. We have to think about multi-touch technologies, location detections. So the overall mobile experience was something that Luke was the first one to make us aware. And I mean, really, everybody who works in the mobile realm today has a lot to owe to Luke. And again, this is some of the info that I have borrowed from a lot of presentations that I've seen and attended where Luke had talked in the past. This was Morgan Stanley research. It's what they published back, I want to say, in 2006 or 2007 was their report. They kind of aggregated all the sales and all the orders for mobile devices that were happening in 2006, and based on that, they made some predictions. They pretty much said that the mobile device or the overall mobile web experience is going to be something that is going to just completely bypass the desktop technology. And as they said back in the 1990s, there were just about 100 million worldwide PC users that were connected. Compared to that, in the 2000s, it kind of pretty much was 1 billion, and then they predicted somewhere around 2011, 2012, the mobile consumer is going to completely outpace the desktop consumer. And as you can see up here, they had predicted the 10 billion plus mark for mobile consumers, which actually is way behind us. We are way more than that right now. But whenever I talk to some of my students or some of the customers, they're like, well, wait a minute, but that's like more than the world population. So that's actually absolutely accurate. It is more, and this is a good kind of understanding of the mobile landscape. Almost 371,000 babies are born every day. Compared to that, about 378,000 iPhones were sold every day in the year 2012. 562 iOS devices were activated on a daily basis. Now that includes like everything, all the iOS devices. Also, to put in the whole mix, about 900,000 Android devices were activated in 2012. So if you go to see the overall extent of these devices that are being activated and being used, that surely surpasses the overall world population, even though not everybody in the world has one device or multiple devices. But here's kind of like a interesting stat where we see that 52% of the U.S. laptop owners own a smartphone. That's like more than half now. And 31% of the U.S. smartphone owners own a tablet. So that kind of gives you a good idea that, well, the way the trend is going, people are comfortable owning more than just one device that keeps them connected, and where they consume, our services or content on multiple platforms. So an overall 13% of Americans own laptops, tablets, and smartphones at the same time, and these are like 2012 numbers. So I'm pretty sure in 2013, we'll see a big hike in those numbers when the report is published. But having said that, what's really important to know is, what is that difference? What does a mobile device really kind of, gives us or enables us as a user, as compared to a desktop? So the first thing, I guess, that most of the mobile pundits talk about is that we need to stop calling our desktop as a PC. It's really not a personal computer, because the amount of time that we spend on a desktop, if anybody is using a desktop or even a laptop full time for all their computing needs, is significantly lower. The amount of time that we are spending with that device is significantly lower than what we spend with our mobile device. I'm pretty sure a lot of you will experience the same thing. But when I wake up, the first thing I make sure is that my battery is 100%. That I have that much charge to take my device through the next time I need to recharge it. Right from there, I'm pretty much, the device is glued on to me. So we permanently carry our mobile device. The second interesting part about the mobile device is that it's always on, right? So you should not be reliant on just the way you are actively looking at your screen while you're using your laptop or your desktop. The mobile device is always on, always connected, and pushing me all kinds of updates to you. The good part about mobile, again, is also that it has a built-in payment mechanism. You can make payments at stores. You're not confined to a desk to kind of make online purchases, but you can just carry your phone and just pay using your phone. Your phone's there with you when you get inspired by something. Your phone's there to document, be notes form, or just take a picture and save it. Whatever inspiration hits you, your phone's there, and that's where you turn as your new scrapbook. The phone also defines an accurate audience, right? So based on some of the demographics that we have seen in the past, we can pretty much kind of say, well, who is an audience that uses certain amount of apps, certain kind of phones. It captures a social context really well. So the kind of apps that students typically install and use, you can define just by a mobile phone usage statistics who is going to be your target audience. Your mobile phone, is something that's unique that gave us augmented reality. It's a completely different experience that we were just not used to. So it just a device that has combined all of our previous experiences. I mean, this is starting from the press, where things were printed, to radio, to TV. Everything is all pretty much packaged in this one tiny bit of a device that we can put it in our pockets. So just to kind of get a sense of the level of interaction now that happens around mobile, let's look at some of the or rather, let's just look at the site that an average user uses the most. So these are again 2012 numbers, where Facebook topped the list of all the sites where on an average 6.42 hours a day have been spent on Facebook. Now obviously some of the demographics are going to skew this, because I personally know some people who spend 7 hours on Facebook every day. Compared to somebody like me, or somebody even like who spends lesser time on Facebook. But this is what the average is for the Nielsen survey. But the astonishing kind of statistics is that 75% of Facebook's traffic comes from mobile devices. Now these are obviously going to be redundant users, where we use Facebook using our devices, but they see that the mobile traffic is just something that they cannot bypass, where they are thinking of Facebook from a mobile perspective now. It wasn't too long ago when Zuckerberg pretty much announced that Facebook truly is a mobile solution going forward. And this is where we can safely say that the mobile moment, where we should have been aware of mobile, and I'm pretty sure most of you are on the same page and already have some mobile specific offerings, but I see a lot of my customers who still are thinking about how do we get into the mobile arena. So literally between like the third and the fourth quarter of 2011 was when Facebook's mobile traffic bypassed their non-mobile traffic, and this is what Luke mentions as the mobile moment. This is very new. There's no going back now. So mobile is here, and if this is news, I'm sorry, but we just cannot at this point not think of mobile. But at the same time, I would say let's not think of mobile as a separate experience of our online experience. And that brings the next point is, how do we define mobile? So if we look at the existing device landscape, we can just kind of come up with 4 major swim lanes. One is the smartphone, the tablet, laptops, and the desktops. Having said that, let's just kind of draw the lines as far as their physical inch-based scale is concerned. If we talk about smartphones, the first wave of smartphones truly came when in 2007 the iPhone was launched. Some of you might have experienced pre-iPhone mobile, kind of usage experience. It was really cool. I mean, it was aggravating, right? Because the screen resolution was really small, the bandwidth was limited. If you stuck around till the website loaded, or the application, whatever you're trying to use, loaded, it was a huge success. So it truly was like a pseudo approximation of the web. It truly was not a mobile experience because the UI, the overall, the screen was just not equipped to give us what we were looking for, because in our mind we were comparing the experience with our desktop experience. So the iPhone was really kind of applauded as the first experience where you can take your desktop experience and experience the same thing on the mobile, because it did a great job of just scaling down websites and giving you this exact same picture at a smaller scale, but at a decent resolution. Now, having said that, we started seeing immediately, the other companies popping up their mobile options in the market. So everyone at that point was right around like 3.5, 3.7 inches. So we had a distinct divide between, what a mobile experience was going to be versus what a regular laptop desktop experience was going to be. But as we saw, again, when Apple introduced that iPad and things just kind of went really crazy, was, okay, now we have something which is an interim between, a mobile experience and a laptop or a desktop experience. So at 9.7 inches, the iPad was something that, okay, now from a from a designer perspective or from a development perspective, we needed to make sure that, okay, well, how is that experience going to be different than the other experience, or does it need to be different? So going back, we can safely say that anything that was kind of like under 5 inches we could define as, well, that's mobile. And anything beyond that is something that we would just pretty much take it as it's consistent experience that we have for web browsing or whatever that you want to do based on our laptop and desktop experiences. But then, the mobile device itself did not stop at that scale. HTC, Motorola, Nokia, Nexus devices kept coming in, and if you notice that pattern, it consistently keeps going up. So big is better in this case, and it just kept going up. Now it's like 4.7 inches, but not, and with 4.3 inches to the Samsung Galaxy Note at 5.3, 5.5 inches, and it just kept going up to Samsung Galaxy Note 3 at 6.4 inches, and lately, like, I've seen a phone with almost like 8 inches. So it's a very blurry line between where do you really define as a mobile phone device versus something that is a tablet experience. So clearly, the phone moved beyond those 5 inches, getting close to the tablet area, and the tablet scene was not any different. 9.7 was just kind of like the launch of the iPad, but then Lenovo came in with 10.1. But surprisingly enough, the tablet went the other way. So with iPad coming up with the iPad Mini, Google Nexus coming up an inch, tablet. I think the only differentiator here is, can you make a phone call using your tablet? If you can, then it's a phone. If not, it's a tablet. The screen size are pretty much now varied with so many options here. So clearly, as you can see, the tablet pretty much touched where the laptop would pick it and go. But the good part is, like, we have been so used to using our laptop, so we knew, well, we have these smaller versions. It's 11 inches, then you go up to 13 inches with 15 inches MacBook Pros, and then Apple also tried a 17-inch option for a MacBook Pro, which they don't anymore, but still, they kind of, we can say that, with the Dells and the other laptop brands, we can really see a lot of 17-inch or even like a 19-inch in some cases. If you're like a gamer looking at Alienware, so it really the consistency is just depending on what you buy, and going again to the desktop model, you start off at 17 inches and go up to 19. So really, all of these sizes are touching each other. So there really is no defined boundary where we can say, well, this is where smartphones end, this is where tablets start, and this is where tablets end. The only, I guess, differentiator is, the physical aspect of it. And also, maybe we could look at another differentiator, which is just the, kind of human ergonomics way of using it. What's the mode of use? Is this something you just kind of carry it in your palm, or is it something that you can, take it and use it in your lap, versus just putting it up on the desk? And then what do you interact with? Do you interact with, touch or just gestures, or do you have a cursor, or do you have a keyboard? Having said that, the new products that are hitting the shelves in the market are constantly defying how we section those appliances. So, for example, the Lenovo Idea Tab is supposed to be a laptop, but then also it could be a tablet, because you can pretty much isolate the screen and use it as a tablet because it has a touch screen. Lenovo also has a ThinkPad and an IdeaPad Yoga that you can flip and then just use as a tablet, and if you want it, you can use as a laptop. So again, the cursor and the keyboard aspect of our interaction is something that was kind of dominating the laptop and the desktop, but now the touch and gesture kind of aspect. Now, having said that, even in the desktop realm, if you look at Sony Tab 20, which is a 20-inch, it's a tablet, but it has a keyboard and a mouse that you can attach to it. But it also you can carry it around. And if you've seen some of those ads, and lately, like Lenovo introduced, I believe it's a 27 or 28-inch tablet, which is humongous, where you can kind of do all sorts of like family activities and stuff with it. So it's impossible to kind of say, well, this is where I'm going to be targeting my product, because the landscape is it's constantly changing. And as you can see, even though we are moving towards a completely touch interface, there are still some products out there that require us to kind of use a keyboard on a handheld device, and it has a tracking pad, and again, depending on what your user base looks like, you might get your clues from where these users are coming from, what they are using to use your offerings, your content. So there really is no divide where we see the cursor keyboard being just defined to laptop and desktop. At this point, it's all a mashup where they could be using anything that requires them to use anything as their input devices. So it's really a challenge for us as designers and as developers to make sure the product that we are putting out is what we can cater to for their usage. So moving on from the overall landscape, one of the biggest questions I get is, so should we still be doing a version of our website? Because the m. or mobile.yourcompany.com option was very, very common and very popular back then, where you pretty much have a distinct divide, and this has been a long-running war going on over the mobile web, and there are two different schools of thought. One where people advocate that yes, you should be having a mobile website, where top researchers like Jacob Nielsen still kind of believe that there should be a mobile version of your websites, but there are a lot of other people who kind of oppose that, or kind of like say, well, most of the concepts are valid, but at the same time, physically, you don't need two different websites. And having said that, Twitter to this day still offers a mobile version of their website. The bigger question is there really a mobile web, right? Because the mobile device, even though it's fundamentally different, does your website need to be that different? And we've seen in the past where when people design for mobile, they tend to make their websites simpler. If you go to many websites, typically around like, I don't want to name any particular website, but if you look at Travelocity or Expedia or some of the websites where it's like a web application that you kind of go through a certain process, on the desktop or on the laptop, your experience is different because you see a lot of these specials and photo galleries and all kinds of bells and whistles, but all of that experience is kind of stripped down to bare minimum, down to the common use cases on a mobile device. And said that as a usability person, I would applaud that because it really takes a user to kind of the point that they're trying to go, and their conversion rate is always higher. But marketing people might disagree because that's something that they want to see as hey, this is also where you can spend your money. I have seen some examples in the past where the mobile site actually became their main website. They saw that there was a lot of bounce rate around their regular website, and people preferred to use the mobile website, rather their success rate on their mobile website was a lot more. So it's kind of important to kind of look at your offering from this perspective: is what is it that you're trying to do, and what is it that defines your success rate. There are still a lot of combination and different case studies point where people are still trying to figure out what their mobile presence needs to look like. The good part about today, this year, this day, is that the devices that we are seeing, people are using them. And just to take an example out of PayPal's experience, is that when they launched, they were ideally just like a mobile payment company, right? So, but the mobile market was just not matured for them to, really make that big bang, and they started their regular desktop offering as well. But they started making money out of mobile. In 2009, I believe they made, and this is going by some of those numbers from research made by all these research firms, but in 2009, they made about $141 million, and in 2012, they made about $10 billion with a B for their mobile devices. So mobile really is something that we cannot be avoiding at this point. This is something that I kind of brushed upon earlier, where Jacob Nielsen says when people access sites using mobile devices, their measured usability is much higher for mobile sites than for full sites, and that's only because that we are aware that using a mobile device, they are constrained with certain things. They might not be in an area where things are fast enough, just like our cable or DSL bandwidths. So from a content perspective, we kind of are aware of that, but it really helps out the user because they are focused and they're not distracted. But something happened in the web design industry a few years ago when Ethan Marcotte, he's a web designer, developer, and lately he's been doing a lot of speaking engagements and also has penned a few books, came up with this one single article on responsive design. And if most of you might have heard this because it's quite a buzzword right now, but it was just a theory, it was just a concept that he had introduced in a web blog. It's like a list apart website. They call it a website for people who make websites. And he had written just one article that really he shot up these red flares and got everyone's attention, where he talked about responsive design. And his article really kind of comes from the notion that responsive design, just like responsive architectural design, where a room or space kind of automatically adjusts to its physical offerings. For example, a discipline where physical spaces change. Maybe they are using some sort of motion sensors paired with maybe climate control sensors, and they can gauge how many people are in the room, and accordingly it can adjust itself. So he was like, well, I mean, I can really kind of take that approach to the web design and development area, where how about we respond to the user's overall behavior and their environment. Be it the screen size, a platform, or even like a simple thing like the orientation of the device that they are using. So responsive design really kind of became very, very common lately, where most of my new projects, everyone is like, well, this is going to be responsive. Maybe they might not use the responsive term, but they want to make sure that the website scales to a mobile experience. So this is kind of the way it works. Is it takes your content and it readjusts based on your mobile device. So regardless of what is it that you're offering, if it's just a plain website, if it's just a simple web form, or if it's like a complex application, it is still something that is aware that the user switches from different devices, right, from their phones to their laptops to their iPads, or even like a desktop, and based on that, the actual code shifts and it responds to the preference. The way it does it is it uses something called as the flexible layouts, and this is pretty much what our legacy experience was, where any website that's not responsive is pretty much scaled down the way you see it on the left-hand side. But with responsive, you kind of like can define, okay, what is the experience you want to give to your users. Flexible layouts, the way they work is, for a full website, like on the left-hand side that you see, it has certain columns and rows, but as you make the window narrower, it scales down. It can, at one point, flexible designs weren't really that flexible. I mean, they give you that notion of flexibility, kind of just was around a few hundred pixels. They couldn't really adjust from a large computer screen to your iPhone or your Android phone. Now you can. You can even make images flexible. They automatically adjust. You can not only make images smaller on the fly, but you can also crop them. So what this technology provided was this awesome experience of taking your web offerings and making your website such that a mobile user can still use it like a regular desktop user. For a while, there was this notion where, the mobile users are not looking for what the website desktop users are looking for. But that's not true. I mean, the amount of time that a user spends on a mobile device, if things are offered the right way, they will take that time and with you. Getting into a little technical aspect of how you do that using this technology is you define breakpoints. So a regular screen at this point, if we just kind of go by saying, well, let's plan for 1024 pixel width. Then at this point, your desktop and your tablet at a landscape orientation can accommodate that. But when it goes to a portrait mode, then your resolution changes. Now it also changes if obviously you're looking at on your phone where it goes down to like 767 pixels, or if you're looking at your phone vertically, then it's like 479 pixels. So what you do is you determine your breakpoints. Your breakpoints are essentially these particular thresholds of where my design changes. This is your design choice where I want to show number 1 up here, or I want to show number 1 on the right, or however you choose to show. And breakpoints, we don't really need many of them, but the amount of breakpoints that you identify for your mobile presence truly also impacts your budget for all the IT managers out there. So I mean, here's kind of like how a flexible layout is essentially affected by your breakpoints, where for a certain resolution, your content, your left sidebar, your right sidebar, you can choose to kind of stack them up based on your screen width. And what drives that is media queries. Media queries, I mean, just kind of like by the name of it, it essentially is something that is supported by cascading style sheets, where you by 2.1 CSS 2.1 there were a few attributes that kind of you could influence your layout design by media queries, but with CSS 3 you really can do a lot. And you can choose to look at a lot of your aspects using media queries. Like you can use width, device width, you can use max width, orientation, colors, and you can, just the way you kind of see up there, you can have a certain CSS file for smartphones, for landscapes, for portraits, both, and it's self-explanatory. If the browser displays this page on a screen rather than a print, then the width needs to be such and such, and then in that case, just kind of go and pull up this particular CSS file. So this is one of the projects that we worked on. This is GeorgiaGov. Used to be a very vanilla website previously. And the standing instructions were, don't make it look like most of the government websites that we see out there. Make it such that other than just the visual aspect of it, it should be something that the user should be able to use it. And that's kind of like where we did a complete redesign. And the designer and the information architect, I mean, they did a fantastic job of looking at what people were using, what they were looking for from a content perspective, and how the site needs to look like on different devices. For example, your tablet, your laptop screens are showing the navigation up at the top, but then if you're on a mobile, be like navigating through my search is what's like up there, what people end up using. So we made sure that the navigation doesn't take up that screen real estate, and that was bumped down to the bottom of the page, whereas search was still kind of consistent up there. So a lot of these decisions are driven based on usage, but at the same time really kind of have to make that call based on your analytics. Moving on from the mobile web aspect to the native mobile applications. The main question that I mostly kind of, I'm put in spot to answer is, do I need a mobile application, or is this something I can do on the web and have a web application for this? Mobile applications are really good as long as you really need a mobile application for. There are a lot of use cases where you need a mobile application if you use it all the time. Like hey, I mean, I love a tip calculator, so that surely qualifies as a mobile app. But there are also a lot of aspects where you need to understand what mobile apps do for you, and what they also can pose as not a risk but a challenge as far as going forward and sustaining your mobile presence. So I mean, most of you, almost all of you at this point, I'm assuming, have a smartphone, so you know what a mobile app, the native app, is. It's a standalone bit of software, that we typically just go to these app stores or marketplaces and just download. It physically sits on our mobile device, as opposed to web applications where it still looks like a mobile app, but it really draws a lot of its content, its info, its data from cloud or whatever the external data is sitting, there are many aspects that you need to think about before making that decision. For example, in a native app, there are some clear pros where yes, it's available through every app store or the Play Store, whatever it is. So you can go and get it. You don't need to memorize the URL for it or whatever. If you need to look for it, but that app is always available to use once you install it. As opposed to you with the web apps, you're going to be relying on the connectivity part of your location. And going forward, we'll look at some of the pros and the cons. And what I've aggregated is a 10 checklist, 10 you kind of make that decision where do I need a native app or should I be doing a mobile web app, because really kind of like each of their pros and cons are significantly different. So here's kind of like the 10-question checklist if you are wondering, and if you have a scenario that doesn't fit in one of these 10, by all means kind of raise your hand. I'll be glad to address it if I was in that situation and I can tell you what was my decision. So the first kind of decision is, do you really need all of that smartphone functionality? A lot of times I've seen where people are driven by wants than needs, but my simple question is, yes, the smartphone comes with a lot of these awesome advantages of local functionality like a GPS or a scan feature, whatever it is. Do you intend to use it for your app? Most of these are like extremely unique functionality, and if you plan on using it, yes, then you absolutely need this as a mobile app versus a web app. The second kind of decision point is, does your app really need you to personalize?
And
yes.
Nikhil, can I inject one question
on
your first decision point itself? So can you list a few key functionalities that clearly help someone eliminate the web option? For example, you mentioned maps or scanning. So are there 2 or 3 or 4 key things that if you indeed need them, you clearly ought to be thinking of a native app rather than a web app? What are such features?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is the camera, right? The camera or GPS. Although I should say that the mobile browsers are getting smarter by the day. There are a lot of theories, and I don't subscribe to one or the other, but I've heard talk that Apple or Google kind of treat mobile web browsers as a stepchild, because their source of income truly comes from native apps, right? So between, I believe the last statistics I had read was like Apple, their overall, I believe 31% of their revenues come from mobile app purchases. So they probably would be sad to kind of see some of their native apps getting transformed into web apps, unless there's like some way to kind of make money out of the web apps. But the mobile devices are getting smarter, so we might see some of these functionalities, kind of not being very specific mobile. But at this point, yeah, if you truly are using your camera, your GPS, like some of the motion aspect, the accelerometer, gyroscope, kind of functionality that is like absolutely native to your device, then I would say yes, that qualifies it to be a native app.
Okay. All right. This helps. Thank you.
Sure. The second one is personalization, where again, a lot of us truly kind of, if we are using the app on a day-to-day basis, then we personalize it, right? Because you don't want to go through putting in that information all over again. For example, all of us know that applications have sessions, web applications, and I drive electric car, and then I have subscribed to a charge service where I just use proximity card reader to plug my card in and charge it. For that, I mean, I have an app, but I do that because I charge my card quite often. And in that case, even though I'm not using like any of those previously talked about functionality, I still use that app almost every week. I still kind of get that app to the app has all my info in it, my payment information, my card information. Once my card is charged, it tells me it's done. So yes, if you have a need that is so super personalized, then I would say in this case a mobile app makes a case as opposed to a web app. The next criteria is also how complex is it? Is it something that requires any of the mobile features? Again, this is kind of like a similar to what we saw in the first thing, except for it could be something that is the business complexity of the app requires you to have a native app. For example, if the app requires to hold on to a certain level of data so you can interact with it at any point, connecting, and rely on your bandwidth. The next thing, like how much money do you have for this project, right? Because apps are not cheap. I mean, yeah, fine, for a native app, there is a one-time cost of creating that app, but what happens after that? iOS and Android would keep coming, new versions and new flavors. Constantly keep the hood open and tweak it. In that case, if you have a limited budget, then doing a web app might be helpful. And if it's still something that you want to do it, then yeah, a native app is the way. If there is a need for monetizing, and this is again kind of like going back to the personalization part of it, where I guess I gave you all my example where it was truly monetizing. It's the app that I downloaded was free, but then they make money off me by me using their service. For example, if you're going to be offering your users options where they could pay to harvest 200 extra pumpkins, I mean whatever the use case is, then yeah, then you probably need a mobile app, because then it stores their payment information, level of security when it comes to monetizing things for these micro purchases. Web app might not give you that level of experience up there. The next thing, which is kind of like super important, from me as a user experience person, is how important is search engine optimization for you? If you want your if your strategy is to increase visibility by search engines and drive traffic to your site, or even like essentially native apps are closed environments and they cannot be crawled by search engines. Obviously, most of the native apps have a website where kind of like they try and market their apps, but it's from an SEO perspective. Obviously, it claims to know what the secret sauce is, but typically web apps have better SEO visibility than native apps. The next criteria is, hey, I mean, what's your roadmap, right? Just like I said, well, are you gonna be like pumping new features constantly? What is your update plan? So if that's something that you have to keep pushing on a constant basis, then I would say stick with the web app, because every time you make any change, any code changes, you have to push it through the app store, and that's just not a good scenario to kind of be dependent on something else, especially if there is an event that's based on a certain timeline. The next aspect is, well, data transfers, right? So on the data that you are actually going to be using. Is it something that's light? Is it something that's heavy? If an app generally works faster if it's a mobile app, if it already is holding all that data. It's not reliant heavily on the internet and the network speed to serve up all that information. So in this case, maybe a mobile app might be a better call compared to a web app. The next thing is how frequently you want to again have your updates, and again, what is your overall version plan. In that case, the updates always kind of have to be planned for lengthy approval, especially with the Apple model. And the last but not the least is accessibility aspect of it. I mean, if you want to appeal to everyone across multiple platforms, devices, web app, and especially some of the web apps with responsive is what I've seen, is just awesome accessibility value to it, and it's fairly straightforward to build, a mobile-specific menu that gives the mobile users what they need. So accessibility is a big part. I mean, I can't even tell you how many places I've been to where people talk about just because something takes extra 2 or 3 seconds to load. We lost that revenue because people just are not patient enough. So people need to access your products, in time, and the overall aspect of the usability, accessibility is truly crucial. But the web apps, and in this case, are going to be helpful. So having said that, I think I'm probably like a minute or 2 behind schedule. Hope that okay. That much, kind of an overall view of what designing your product for a mobile presence is going to be a challenge. And if there are going to be any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Nikhil. So at this point in the presentation, I'll encourage audience to think about questions. And as you're thinking about questions, and we'll take a few questions in a few minutes. In the meantime, let me just quickly go over, and maybe in the interest of simplicity, Nikhil, if you can just advance the pages, and I'll quickly talk about Synergip in just a few seconds while people are putting their questions in the Q&A panel. So those of you who have not been exposed to Synergip, here's a quick introduction to Synergip. We are a software development services partner for typically venture-backed software companies. Most of our clients tend to be growing venture-backed software company, and what we do for them is, for every client, we put together a dedicated software team that serves as an extension of the in-house engineering team, and goes on for the ongoing development work. We are big followers and practitioners of agile software development practices, and we do a fair amount of work in leading technology areas such as mobile development and analytics and cloud and so on. And the advantage we bring to our clients is we are able to provide a 50% cost advantage because of our dual shore team structure. We have a development team in India and a team on the US side. And in addition to that, we provide a flexibility to our clients, which allows them to convert the team that is working for them with Synergip into a captive team whenever they feel like it. So essentially allows them to scale in a capital efficient manner for their software development work, yet retain the long-term flexibility to convert their team into a captive operation. So Nikhil, if you can hit the few other buttons here to show up rest of the points which I've already covered, and then we can, if we go to the next page after that, it shows a glimpse of Synergip clients, which are essentially all small to mid-size, typically small to mid-size venture-backed software companies. We have a few large clients also, and a few really small startups, but by and large, that's the sweet spot, is small to mid-size software companies that we serve. With that, let's come back to taking the questions. So if you're ready, I'll take a few questions, Nikhil, based on the content that you covered. Okay, so the first question let's take is this discussion. You'd spend a lot of time talking about these 10 decision points for native versus web app. Any thoughts on what some people call hybrid approaches to mobile design and development using some of the third-party middleware pieces? Do you have any thoughts on where they fit into the spectrum, whether they work or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's actually a really good, kind of question, because hybrid is, they use the kind of middleware. I mean, it's essentially a web app in, a wrapper, right? So for most of these issues that we talked about, where you don't have to kind of go through this lengthy approval process, if you have like a pretty aggressive update schedule roadmap. I've seen that a lot. Where people use any of these middleware products, and they launch their app. It looks exactly like from the App Store. It looks like a native app, but essentially behind the scenes there is a web app running right there. It heavily relies on HTML5, CSS3, and that is something that you could leverage. All I would say is just make sure the vendor that you're working with has a pretty good idea of kind of like the whole hybrid aspect of it, because you kind of have to be aware of both sides of native development and web development.
Okay. All right, great, thanks. Let's take another question. You covered in your session a lot of examples and alluded to Android and iOS. Any thoughts on where Windows 8 stands in terms of its market presence and adoption? Companies who are seeking to mobile strategy, how should they think about Windows, accounting for Windows 8 in their roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, I think that surely is, because it's Windows 8, people are aware of it. If it was any other option, if it was like any other player, we might not even have heard of it, honestly, because last I checked, I believe Windows 8 had just about 7% of market share at this point, compared to iOS and Android. And personally, like, I have not worked on a single app, so I really can't say much about it. But I would say go by your statistics. If you see a majority of your users are crossing that threshold of you need to be considering development for Windows platform, then absolutely go for it. I mean, I just have not worked on any of the Windows apps at this point.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. Let's take another question, and maybe this will need to be the last question given our time constraint here. Can you talk a little bit about the planning as companies are going through their mobile strategy, and mobile is here, as you amplified in today's webinar, Nikhil.
Mm-hmm.
What's your perspective on planning for budget and cost? But there's obviously a certain amount of effort that goes in one time building up the application, whether you do it in native or you do a web app. But then there is a certain amount of ongoing support required. So
right.
Talk a little bit about how to plan for that and what any rules of thumb.
Sure. I mean, I've helped a few organizations come up with their mobile strategy, and a lot of times it's a twofold strategy. One is to kind of have a mobile presence, while the other one is to probably have a mobile option that generates revenue. And both these strategies are pretty important, because your mobile presence is what's going to lead people to kind of your offering that generates revenue for you. It is very important to kind of define what is success for you, and what are you willing to pay for it, because I mean, exactly like you were just mentioning, that there is a good amount of cost that goes in just sustaining. And then what do you plan on that? You just want to keep the lights on, you want to be pushing new enhancements, and every time you do that, it's going to cost you money, so you're going to have to account for it. And it's the same thing, be it a web app or a native app. It just differs based on what is it that you're trying to do and who is it you're trying to source your development to. But you need need to account for, the overall plan of what you have, where you want to go. But there are also going to be some of the things that you react to, right? So if there's like a new operating system that's been launched that is kind of conflicting with something that you're offering, or you see an opportunity where where you could be leveraging something, then by all means, you're going to have to budget for some of those enhancements and be thinking about that. So a lot of times you're right. I mean, I kind of hear from customers where they have a view where this is like a one-time thing that I'm going to spend, and then once I launch the app up there, it's just going to take care of itself. It's not. I mean, it's almost like a pet. You have to nurture it, you have to walk it, and to make sure it's healthy. So I would totally say your overall strategy has to include not only just the decisions based on what is it they're going to be doing, but how are you going to be like sustaining in that. So whoever builds that app for you, make sure that shop is big enough to kind of sustain and develop your you support your app, not just kind of like develop, hand it to you, and then they're gone. Typically, I've seen people who build are in a better position to support. So I would say, looking at vendors out there, look at not just somebody who can build this for you, but also somebody who can support it for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for shedding light on this topic of designing for mobile. Really appreciate that in these insights and overall perspective. And thank you, audience, for joining us. Stay tuned for another valuable webinar next month. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm glad to.